Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Brewster. If you are visiting for the first time, we'd like to invite you to stay for coffee hour following the service, and please make your way to the visitor table, which is in the hallway, so we can greet you more appropriately. There also are like a little brochure in front of you. Feel free to take one of those. It tells you more about who we are. One of the other things I want to make sure that you guys do this morning is take your cell phones out, and turn them off, please. I'm Reverend Karen Anderson. I'm the interim minister, and I'm joined by our guest accompanying us, Lucy Banner. We also record our services, so they are live streamed and on YouTube. Can we all give a little wave to those online this morning? I have a few announcements I just want to check in about. Next Sunday is our annual Children and Youth Ministry service. It's not to be missed. Following the service, we'll have a potluck brunch and then the budget presentation. I am told that if you are first through the line and want to go to the budget presentation, you can be first in the line to the potluck. That's a pretty good reason to go. The other piece is this summer we are honored to be partnering with Food for Kids. It's a not-for-profit that provides lunches to families over the summer to ensure every child on the Cape is able to have at least one nutritious meal while they're not in school. We are looking for volunteers who are willing to help this effort by committing to noon to 1 time frame for kids and families as they come to pick up a meal out of this cooler. And if you would like to participate, please get a hold of Twinks, who's our Director of Religious Ed. Finally, Jim Lieb asked me to share that I am doing the invocation tomorrow for the City of Brewster's Memorial Day celebration. It is at the Brewster Council of Aging. It starts at 12 o'clock. I'd love to see some of you there. Please join with me now in the spirit of worship. I invite you to take a deep breath in and blow it out. As many of you know, my husband and I have a horse farm in upstate New York. And we live outside of a little town called Honeyoke Falls. Now, Honeyoke Falls is a little conservative, you might say. On all of the telephone poles throughout town, there are banners that have everyone who serves in the military in the town, a picture of them, on all the telephone poles, and on the top it says hometown hero. When you go to the grocery store and you walk in, there's like a bulletin board on your right-hand side, and there also are pictures of everyone in town who serves in the military. Some of them are actually sitting on the back of like a pickup truck with a rifle next to them. So I tell you that story just so you understand the context. Last summer, Scott was working on the farm, and he was kind of sweaty and disheveled, as you become when you're working outside in the summertime. Anyway, we were out of food for dinner that night, and he decided to go to the grocery store kind of sweaty and disheveled, and shows up at the grocery store. And normally our grocery store is like this very pleasant experience, and people smile at you and say hello to you. And he's walking through, and people are kind of looking at him a little askance, not all of them, but he's feeling uncomfortable. He gets his way to the cereal aisle, and he looks down at his shirt that says, "War is not the answer." And he realized that may be one of the reasons people are looking at him a little askew. So he's walking around, he's feeling a little self-conscious about his shirt, and he gets almost to checking out, and this woman comes up to him and she says, "I have something for you." She reaches into her bag, and he says his first thought was, "Please don't give me a pamphlet on your faith." But that wasn't it. She takes out this origami dollar bill that is completely folded into a rose with the picture of George Washington like right in the middle of it. And she says to him, "I am an ex-hippie who is trying to hold on my faith that things can get better. And I hand these out to beautiful people to remind me that there's more of a pluralism kind of in this world than I think there is. And you help me hold on to my faith." I think that so often when we're thinking about faith, we're talking about or remembering that it's about ourselves sometimes, like how can I hold on to faith? How can I have faith? But that's only half the coin, really. The other half is how we sometimes, in very small ways, help other people hold on to their faith. And the truth is, that's one of the reasons that we come to church. Not necessarily so we can hold on to some kind of faith, but that we can, in our actions, both for ourselves and for the rest of humanity, move into that space of offering a different way of being in the world so people can hold on to their own faith as well. And then people can begin again. Welcome to our celebration of life. It's so good to be with all of you. Before we sing our first hymn, would you please rise with enthusiasm, like that, and greet your neighbor this morning. So we're not having a time where we sing out the kids. Yeah. So you guys can just go down whenever you want, like at the end of the first hymn if you want to bring kids down, okay? I know I forgot. I have one announcement real quick, please. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Do I move this? Okay.
Ricky, can you turn this on, please?
I think it is on. I was asked to speak to you all on behalf of the Social Justice Committee. And first of all, we have an appreciation. It's right in keeping with what Rev Karn has just been talking about. We sent out 4,360 postcards as a group. Woo! And that's certainly in honor of our democracy. And also, Carol Ann Yeaple, I don't know if she's here. There she is the first person to have done a packet of the letters. So yay. The other thing we wanted to invite you to next Sunday, it's a busy day, and from 12:30 to 2 in the parish room, the Social Justice Committee is going to be organizing just a beginning, lightweight letter writing activity where we're going to start with the nonpartisan vote forward letters to people in areas where their votes have been made more difficult, let's put it that way. So we invite you to come, and you can stay for a little or a lot. But we'll do the votes all summer, and then we'll mail them in October. So thanks a lot.
Okay, Miss Lucy's going to play us through this hymn, because we haven't sung this one that much, okay? Would you please rise as you are willing and able and join in singing number 40, The Morning Hangs a Signal. Yes, Lucy's going to play this hymn through all the way through first so you can hear it. Light our chalice this morning with these words. We gather as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Please join with me in our affirmation words. We believe in love. We believe in truth. We believe in helping others. We believe in the sacredness of life. This is a time in our service where we offer our heartfelt gratitude to organizations that do work that are in keeping with our values. This morning's offering is a split plate with Middle East Children's Alliance. The Middle East Children's Alliance works to improve the lives of children in Israel, Palestine, and Syria, especially refugees, through aid, improvement, and education. Mecca is allowed in Gaza and provides families with children with water purification systems. I like to remind us each week that the religious person is the grateful person, and the grateful person is the generous person. Let us now take the offering mindfully and gratefully. I invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation, followed by some shared silence. I'm going to have us today do silence twice. Please get yourself comfortable in your seat and turn inward with me now. Spirit of life, we gather this Memorial Day weekend surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. First among them are all those we remember this day who have lost their lives in war. Members of the armed forces, civilians in service, innocent bystanders, children. Those who share our homeland are remembered today in this country, but the ritual is repeated on other days in other countries all over the world. For those among us who have lost those who are family members or a friend as they served our homeland, this day is a reminder that mourning and honoring never ends. For their service and their sacrifice, we pause in the silence of memory and respect. We We cannot forget the other witnesses this day, all those who currently serve in the armed forces. We pray for their safe return. We give thanks for all those who returned from service, who know war's aftermath and the toll that it can take on the human heart. Though this Memorial Day is dedicated to those lost in war, all the beloveds we have lost are present to us this day. We hold their names and their faces in our mind's eye. We recall the gifts they gave to us through the strength of their being, the depth of their love, the courage of their dying, and the fullness of their living. So, friends, in the holy quiet of this hour, surrounded by all these witnesses who live with us in blessed memory, we return with them once again in the silence, in tribute to all that they have meant to us. May the silence we have shared continue to hold and heal us all. Amen. Lucy's going to lead us in Spirit of Life. Start today with a reading that comes from the author Tim O'Brien from his book, How to Tell a True War Story. Tim O'Brien is a veteran of the Vietnam War. Said this: "A true war story is never moral. It does not instruct, nor encourage virtue, nor support models of proper human behavior, nor restrain men from doing the things men have always done. If a story seems moral, do not believe it. If at the end of a war story you feel uplifted, or if you feel that some small bit of rectitude has been salvaged from the larger waste, then you have been made victim of a very old and terrible lie." Here ends this morning's reading. "It's like going into a dense forest without a map," he said. "Once you're in the forest, it's easy to lose your bearings and very unlikely you'll ever exit the same way that you came in. It's clear right away that you're on a different journey than you thought you would be on. In fact, a different journey than the one they told you would be on. It's not even clear it's a journey anymore. Mainly, it's a matter of keeping yourself moving. This is what my divinity school professor had to say about war. He only talked about his military service 2 or 3 times, and each time it caught me off guard. It was hard to think of him as a soldier, actually. He had a gentle way about him, and he was very slight in his build, so he fit that image of a theology professor perfectly, but didn't really square with that idea you have of what a sergeant is supposed to look like. But then again, if you paid attention, there were visual signs of his service. He carried a weight about him, something heavy, something not easily communicated or shared. And the best that he could do was talk about a forest, never a story about the actual events, just this metaphor of being lost in a forest. And if you do keep moving, he said, eventually you make it home. But even if you make it home, you never really make it out of the forest. I start this morning with the story of my divinity school professor because it seems to me that Memorial Day is largely about stories. Or maybe it's better to say it's about being visited by stories. Another story that visited me this weekend comes from my husband. He grew up in the Church of the Brethren, which is one of those 4 peace kind of denominations. It's Amish, Mennonite, Quaker, and Church of the Brethren. Now, Scott went to a Quaker college, and while he was there, he led a Quaker youth group. And his role actually was to help the juniors and seniors in that Quaker youth group decide whether or not they wanted to be conscientious objectors or not. He invited a number of veterans to come and talk to the group, and the lieutenant with the Purple Heart actually was the one that struck everybody the most. He said he was proud of the medal, but it only called for kind of partly his story. He also called the medal having a burden to it. It's not easy to wear, he said, because it lies. It tells the truth about one story, but certainly not the truth about the whole story. For instance, it doesn't tell of the night. In truth, he said, the many nights, I purposely slowed my pace and pulled back just enough so others could lead and take the bullet instead of me. Doesn't tell of the night that we panicked and shot the German soldier bursting through the door, but it wasn't a soldier, it was a civilian. These stories aren't told by my Purple Heart. These stories stay inside, and I have to carry them alone. Final story I want to share with you comes from a friend of ours, our friend Paul, who served in Afghanistan and is now a New York State patrol officer. And he told us about this friend of his who served in Iraq, who when he got back, he was from a little town, and the town threw this celebration and honor of him. And his friend told him that he felt sick through the entire event. He said heroics weren't involved. I never engaged the enemy, not even once. I just cleaned up bodies, a lot of innocent bodies. Planes dropped bombs, people died, I cleaned it up. To call it heroic just doesn't make sense. Again, Tim O'Brien writes, a true war story is never moral. It does not instruct, nor encourage virtue, nor suggest models of proper human behavior, nor restrain men from doing what men have always done. If a story seems moral, do not believe it. If at the end of a war story you feel uplifted, or if you feel that some small bit of rectitude has been salvaged from the larger waste, then you have been made the victim of a very old and terrible lie. So here's my question this morning. In light of O'Brien's guidance about true war stories, and in light of the stories that I have told you that have visited me this last week, and I just shared with all of you, and perhaps some of the stories that have visited some of you, I think the question has to be asked, how does one give a true Memorial Day sermon? Or maybe to widen that, how does a congregation participate in a true Memorial Day service? Trying to answer this for myself, that lieutenant's story about his Purple Heart has been the best guide. What my husband Scott said, that he said to him that night, was that the story of medals and ribbons and heroes is never enough. Alone, it is never true. Or to put it another way, celebration is never enough. It doesn't redeem the burden carried by soldiers as much as force them to bury it and carry it alone. So given this, it seems to me that a true Memorial Day service must, above all else, address and even try to heal this burden that soldiers carry alone. Lawrence Lachey is a psychologist who has made the burdens of servicemen and women his life's work. He says that in order to understand war and the impact of war, the first thing one has to do is get a distinction between mythic reality and sensory reality. War requires mythic reality, he says. Without it, societies and individuals simply wouldn't engage in war. Indeed, they can't engage in war. A story needs to be created and told that enables us to relate to war as something other than organized murder. Stories that lift up the idea of the human race need to be dissolved and reshaped into a story about tribes. And these need to be tribes of not only us and them, but enemies and heroes. Killing needs to be reframed as fighting for all that is true and just. Armies need to be seen not simply as masses of effectively trained men and women, but as tools and even as servants of the mythic forces of good and evil. Simply put, mythic reality is not so much reality as the story we wrap around reality. Sensory reality, says Lachey, is something very different. It is the direct, more unmediated experience itself. It is the blood and death, not so much the meaning of the blood and death. It is a man in a uniform, different from your own, lying on the ground, crying out for his mother, asking you, the one who shot him, for help. It is looking in his eyes and seeing human pain, not an inhuman other. Sensory reality is being engaged in a gunfight without thought of a God or country or goodness in your mind. Only the single goal of trying to keep yourself and your fellow soldiers alive. It is not the meaning of the war, but the specific actions and moments that make up the war. Sensory reality is what Tim O'Brien is talking about when he refers to experience that doesn't instruct or uplift, but simply is experience that sits there and refuses to redeem itself. Sensory reality is the reality of those who fight wars. Mythic reality is the reality of the rest of us who talk and think about war. And here's the hardest part about what Lawrence Leshane has to say, actually. He says that those of us who live in and off of mythic reality want to keep it that way. And it's not really malicious, not necessarily even conscious on our part. When it comes to war, no human being wants to face the sensory reality of it. The desire to buffer yourself from the obscenity and terror of war is natural and understandable. Military personnel simply can't do that. They have no choice, but the rest of us do. They can't avoid the directness, the reality of it all. We can. And thus the gap between the warrior and those who send the warrior to battle looms very large. There's a scene, actually, in that movie, Saving Private Ryan. Have some of you seen that movie? And Tom Hanks' character says at one point, he's talking about the relationship between war and home, and he says this, "So I guess I've changed," he says. "Sometimes I wonder if I've changed so much my wife is ever going to recognize me whenever it is I get back to her, and how I'll ever be able to tell her about days like today. I just know that every man I kill, the farther away from home I feel." Hank's character puts the emphasis here on how killing on the battlefield distances him from home. I think it's important to recognize that this is only part of what causes that distance, though. What happens back home also widens the gap. During wartime, those of us back home aren't passive, really. We aren't just waiting for our loved ones to return. We are, knowingly or not, active. We too are engaging, albeit in a radically different way than those in a battlefield. We are telling stories. We are choosing bumper stickers, designing rituals, decorating our porches. We, again, knowingly or not, are telling ourselves a story about what war is. We are creating a reality to live in. And I think if we are honest, if we are able to be honest, we have to admit that the reality most actively cultivated and created is a mythic one. In other words, while our soldiers are away, we as a country aren't engaged in activities that bring us closer to those who serve. Instead, we're involved in an activity that ultimately separates us from them. The truth, the hard and tragic truth of what happens at home in wartime is not that we stand by our troops, but that we systematically build walls, mythic walls, to protect ourselves from our troops. Their reality, their sensory reality, is the last thing our fragile minds and hearts want to experience. So here's the thing. If a Memorial Day service is committed to truth, if it is to be a true Memorial Day service, it must be the very opposite of mythic. It must be loyal to that what has been imprisoned inside. It must be loyal to making sure that what is inside is able to come out, is able to be shared. Which is all a way of saying that I believe a true Memorial Day experience is as much about us as it is about those who have died in service. A true Memorial Day experience, I believe, doesn't simply honor the sacrifices made by military men and women. It also calls on the rest of us to make a sacrifice out of respect and honor and love and gratitude for those who have served. I think we are called to sacrifice and resist the comfort and protection granted to us by mythic reality. I mentioned a moment ago how we back home are knowingly and unknowingly creating a mythic reality about war that keeps us a safe distance from the painful reality of war and our soldiers who can't distance themselves from it. Though recognizing the creative story building part of this highlights, I think, that the way one must also be creative. Or to put it another way, our way out must involve new creative storytelling, finding new stories that minimize and heal the gap between those of us who are civilians back home and those of us who served. And for me, here's a great story to get to that. I learned a couple of years ago that in medieval times, soldiers were welcomed home in a radically different way than we welcome them home today. Instead of being welcomed home by big parades and decked out in neatly pressed uniforms decorated with medals, returning military, those who were alive and dead, were stopped outside the village gates. With the entire community in attendance, the soldiers were stripped of their uniforms, they were washed by people in the village, and they were given new clothes. The religious leaders invited and heard their confessions and offered the assurance of forgiveness. And then the villagers also knelt and also asked for forgiveness, an acknowledgement that what had been done was ultimately done by all. All of this was explained in a radio interview, and the person being interviewed was a military chaplain. He concluded by saying that what the medieval communities understood in a way that we simply don't is that what military men and women need most upon their return from war is not a community that celebrates you like a hero and excuses all the terrible things you did, but a community that commits itself to looking at and sharing the burden of what was done. Those communities offered their soldiers so much more than celebration, he said. In struggling to see and help carry their burdens, they actually offered love. So friends, on this Memorial Day, may we remember to create new storylines that help heal the divide. And may we remember that by creating a new storyline that involves all of us, we in some small way may actually help heal all of us. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and joining in singing our final hymn. This is my absolute favorite hymn. I would sing this every week if I could. This is actually Finland's what do you call it? National anthem. Would you please join hands for the closing words? Whatever we can do or a dream we can do, let us begin it. Boldness has genius and power and magic in it. May we ever be bold in our living and in our loving. Amen.